Welcome to the interview. I'm Ciara Pressler. This is Pregame virtual. I'm not at the clubhouse. I am at home. We're still in that quarantine lifestyle, but it's all good because that means I can bring you some of my very favorite friends and experts from everywhere. And today we have a pregame favorite, author Karla Starr, who is usually coming to us from New York City, but actually happens to be just a few blocks away from me today, but we're still doing this virtual thing, playing it safe. So welcome, author Karla Starr. Woo!
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for coming back. I haven't seen you for a few months, but we've been staying in touch via phone. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I came in from New York last week or so. Now I'm in Portland, and so I'm much less stressed now. It's great.
How has it been in New York? Just give us a little rundown. I think most of us are on the West Coast in the studio audience today. What has it been like navigating this whole thing from the epicenter, at least for the United States?
I'm not gonna lie, it feels like a war zone. There's just a lot of like helicopters and emergency this and that and rationing and lines and constant stress. And I think even when you just try to focus on what you have to do in the bright spots, it's just everywhere. So it's really impossible to escape. So it's made me very grateful for everything, really.
Yeah, I mean, you have been working during all of this. I think that's, it's tragic, of course, the people who've lost work due to COVID, due to business closures, due to everything going on. But, it's extremely mentally challenging and emotionally challenging to continue working also. So how have you been managing yourself as someone who is a full-time writer?
Well, I mean, I've just been focusing on health and mental health and physical health and self-care. I mean, that's been my number one priority since this whole thing began, because I feel like that needs to be the bottom of the pyramid, because otherwise I just can't function as a human being. And so that means that I don't work as many hours as I used to, but it also means that I stay relatively sane. And that is the most important thing.
Definitely. We've been talking a lot because I know a big topic that's of interest to you right now is resiliency. And as an individual, how do we bounce back from setbacks? So I know you're always just mired in the research. So what is interesting you right now in this huge topic of resiliency?
Well, yeah, I've been researching. Actually, that's one of the ways I've been coping with it, is kind of trying to research my way out of it and, and figure out how people deal with bad luck and how we can get over that quickly, and then applying that to my life. And so it has actually been really helpful. I think one of the big things is that it's helped me understand the importance of redefining my relationship with uncertainty and just accepting it as a normal part of life. Sometimes it's obviously very big and noticeable to everyone. And sometimes it's just not. Sometimes it's like a little personal thing. So I just find that just focusing on what I can control has been really helpful, and making sure all of my like various tanks are full. So reaching out to people, seeing how I can help, instead of just reaching out to people when I need help. And that gives a little extra tank in my gas, because I get to feel like I did something for someone else. And also just making sure that I eat well, because that can also for me at least, go downhill quickly. Making sure my sleep is, all those things. It is really amazing, like the more research I do, how you realize that like everything is connected, in you as a person. So it's like, unless you are physically healthy, you just can't think. It's like your prefrontal cortex degrades if you get less sleep, or if it's of lower quality. And then your relationships can suffer if you're stressed and you snap at people. So it actually has helped me understand like the importance of like a holistic approach.
Yeah, I love that. You talk a lot in our conversations about an ecosystem versus an ecosystem, and having to look at everything as a holistic picture. Is that part of this?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think just the whole idea of like zooming out and kind of understanding also like how work fits into your life too. Because I know for me personally, when you're self-employed, and you feel like you don't have anyone else, like you don't have those neat boundaries, where you can just kind of go to the office and then come home. It's like sometimes my apartment feels like, a big office with a bed, So ecosystem is where you are kind of a self-centered view of looking at things, where you view your interactions with other people at zero sum. Like, I'm not going to, do the dishes in return, right? Feels like it costs. Whereas an ecosystem is looking at these same behaviors as, oh, this is something positive that I can do to add some kind of benefit to the relationship in general, right? If I'm a giver, then, you're not kind of constantly keeping score in your mind. And that ends up being a huge bonus for all of your relationships. And so I've been trying to practice that with my professional relationships and my personal relationships. And it's just been really, really helpful.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting and something to pause and note that in the same breath you talk about filling your tanks, sleep, wellness, relationships, and that one of the ways you do that is by giving, by calling up to someone else and seeing how you can help. And I think that seems like an opposite, but you're saying that helping other people is a way that you can fill yourself.
Right. And I think so much of it has to do with the idea of like cognitive reappraisal. So that's one of the big things in resilience and dealing with stress. So for example, Olympians or elite performers, they might have the same increase in cortisol right before they perform, but elite performers are really good at saying like, oh no, these are just butterflies in my stomach, right? Whereas someone who like might not perform very well would say, oh, I have that feeling, everything's horrible, I'm gonna die. So it's just the exact same thing that's going on, but how you define it. So in this sense, it's the exact same thing, right? It's like doing dishes for people. But if, you say, oh, this is something positive that I'm doing, then it's going to just have a good effect on the relationship. And you know what? If it's just something as simple as reinterpreting it, then why not do that? Like you really have nothing to lose. So there's also this thing called like this stress mindset, which has been really fascinating. So if you automatically believe that stress is bad, you're going to try to avoid it and blah, blah, blah. If you realize how sometimes, stress can be good, like if the deadline is coming up and it's like where you bring your A game, it can actually be beneficial to your performance. So once again, it really is just like in how you interpret things.
Yeah, we use that a lot at pregame, we call it reframing, which sounds like it's the same thing. Yeah, and having that growth mindset so important. And when we're doing goal setting, of course, for us, it's in a business framework. So, I'm setting a goal, but also identifying at the outset what my obstacles might be, and then reframing those obstacles. So an obstacle like, well, I don't have the time, or I don't have the resources, or I don't have enough money. Like, how can you reframe that as an opportunity to, go out and find those resources, or at least be aware enough that you can change it? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the things that I've been looking at too is what ends up causing stress is where we see something as an impediment to our goal. So one of my new mantras is learning is the only goal. So
I love that.
Right? So it's like if something comes up, then you don't see it as an obstacle. It's like, okay, what is the lesson here? Maybe I just have to learn patience instead of like, oh my God, I'm waiting for 5 minutes. This is the worst thing that's ever happened to me, right? Just maybe this is a good time to like, work on a breathing exercise or something, So there's always a lesson. And I've been saying this for a while, and my mom just watched the masterclass with Steve Martin, and she's like, that's what he said too. He's like, if it's a bad performance, just learn something from it. And I was like, I said something kind of similar to Steve Martin, and that just made my day.
If it's Steve Martin approved, it's good, right?
Right.
Yeah, I use that tool a lot in driving. It's commuting of any kind when you have to do it is very good. If I see somebody who's driving too slow, I just think, could be my mother, could be someone who just got in an accident and now they're traumatized. I got to be patient with that.
Exactly. Like you never know the story. So why not just give them the benefit of the doubt? This could be a good opportunity to work on creativity or forming narratives, right? Like what's a good story or what's a good character we can create to like, excuse that person's behavior.
Yeah, I have to be careful. Sometimes I can be too compassionate. There's always that devil's advocate side of like, well, if I'm excusing somebody, like 10 times in a row, there might be a boundary that needs to be created there too.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So another good thing to bring into this is like making sure it's filling your cup, making sure it's like doing something for you. If you're not getting anything out of the relationship, it's like there are only so many times you reframe it where it's like,
Yeah. Yeah, I think this has been a time the past few months that some relationships are being reevaluated for that give and take.
That is a very kind way of looking at it, because I
Yeah.
think at first I was really like excusing a lot of bad behavior because it is very stressful and it's a pandemic. But I think the longer that this has gone on, like one of the reasons I've been wanting to research like stress and resilience and like how you can just keep going forward despite all of these like unpredictable, uncertain obstacles, is that it has been amazing to me how pretty much the same thing can happen, right? Like the pandemic is happening to us all, but people are responding in such different ways.
Yeah.
And as a result, it's like their lives are going like this, right? Like completely different life trajectories. So there's actually this thing in personality psychology called the strange situation paradox, which is in moments like this where there are no really set defined social norms, our habits, our character traits end up becoming that much more important, because it's like in the absence, right? So behavior is always like person plus the situation. So like when the situation is ambiguous, it's like what we bring to it that matters that much more. So it's like our response to this thing that matters like that much more, you know. And you can be as like take things with a grain of salt and just kind of go with the flow, or you can be one of those people who's constantly like, when is this going to end? I need to know everything right now, even though there's no way that anyone knows any of that.
Yeah, our coping skills really come to light. And there's a difference between going through something versus that being your default way of being, right? Like everybody freaks out sometimes, everyone gets depressed sometimes or gets angry, but like, is that your default setting?
Exactly. Or like, is your ability, like how well can you kind of course correct, you know, or self-soothe, as they say, or are you just kind of expecting like the world to do it for you, or are you like taking responsibility and able, you know, to do it for yourself?
Yeah, this is something I use a lot in coaching, where if somebody's perpetually stuck in a certain area, looking at, you know, what benefit are you getting out of the stuckness? You know, like I've had clients before, they come to me and they're like, oh, nothing's working, I really need to solve this. And then, you know, 6 months, the same things aren't working. And I have to take a look at like, wow, this person's really getting some sort of other benefit out of being in the victim role, maybe always, or being the martyr always, or
Right.
being helpless always. Like there's some payoff in that that's keeping them stuck.
Right. Or they don't even realize it. Like, because I think for a lot of people, actually, it's just change is so difficult. And, you know, was the saying, like, you don't always realize how much something is affecting you until you make a change. And it's just really, really, you know, your comfort zone is by definition very comfortable.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe moving out of it might ultimately be better. But I think it's just that process of itself, of like trying something new and like for long enough to actually like see some kind of results, you know, instead of just saying like, I'll try it once. Oh, that didn't work. You know, like I meditated for 5 minutes and now I'm not Buddha. So that whole mindfulness thing is a sham.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. But are they getting something out of it? Or maybe there are just a lot of things in their life that they're not, it could be prevented by a lot of different things, but so one of the things that I've also been working on for like stress and resilience is like people's mental models of like how the world works or what they need. Like all of their, like the systems in their life and all their behavior comes out of that. And I think sometimes people are just kind of stuck. It's like they don't realize that the framework or the definition they're using is kind of impeding any change. So I know for a lot of people, it might be like, oh, well, I have to, you know, spend this much money on something, or I have to spend this much time on something, or I need a house that's this big at least. And it's like all these default settings, as you're saying, it's like they don't realize are getting in the way.
Yeah. Core beliefs, I've heard that called.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's talk projects. So you have a really exciting project in process. The next book is coming out, your third book. Tell us about it.
So my third book?
Yes.
Yes. It is, well, for right now, the working title is Unbreakable Foundations.
Mm-hmm.
And it is how we can make progress despite all this uncertainty, and how we can just keep going. And I think one of the things that really kind of got to me was when I was reading some books on habits, and I realized that something like just putting your shoes by the door if you want to get into like some sort of exercise routine. You know, what happens if, you know, one day you're in a different situation, or you have, you know, surgery or something, or blah, blah, blah. Because, you know, unpredictable, uncontrollable things get in the way. And so I think habits can be really, really fragile. And, so we need to be able to like look at why is it sometimes that change doesn't last, it doesn't stick, why it doesn't last. So building a system to help people kind of like implement that in their life.
Yeah, no one talks about that. We always talk about, getting started, like those fast results. We love those fast results. I think of like the Whole30, it's a really big undertaking to completely change your diet for 30 days, but it sort of suggests an endpoint, So
Right.
The next step is like, how do you build habits? So that's something I've been working on in my own personal goals. So yeah, great, I build a habit, but then what happens when a global pandemic happens, or I move, or I change jobs or something, and the environment is different, and then I have a really hard time maintaining those healthy habits.
Exactly. And then what parts of the environment are affecting you, and what parts can you change or work with? And sometimes I think a lot of people don't realize how much the environment is affecting them, which is kind of what has frustrated me with a lot of psychology research historically, where they don't always look at that. So one of my favorite examples is, the marshmallow study, where they put kids in front of the marshmallow, and if they say, hey, don't eat it, if you can wait 15 minutes, we'll give you a second one. So they did this a few years earlier with kids who were from lower income houses, and they found that the kids couldn't wait, partially because they didn't really trust the researchers that they would give them a second piece of candy, because when you're from a really unpredictable, just kind of chaotic environment, you learn to just kind of take what you can get, and that the distant rewards might not necessarily be there. So it's not necessarily a flaw. It's actually a really adaptive behavior pattern in that situation when things are really uncertain or just really chaotic, right? Just to take what you can get. And that's why evolution like still has that mechanism, built into us, that when we are in times of uncertainty, like that's actually adaptive. Like waiting is not always the very best thing you can do. So I think in the long term, that's what we see in evolution. Animals who were like able to like adapt their behavior faster are less prone to extinction, right? Adapt or die. So in the long term, it's not just waiting for the marshmallow, it's kind of like knowing when to take it.
I love that. Yeah, it's really the next level from that classic study we've all heard about. Mm-hmm. A question we have in here, or a comment at least, is somebody in our lovely Zoom studio audience is saying, learning is how I attract or how I attack fragility. So, and what are your ways? So fragility may be just feeling less stable in something, but learning, what else can you do?
Yeah, learning, I think that's the biggest thing. I think any kind of like social support is a big one. Any kind of like anchors you can give yourselves. And I think I would say like small shocks can actually make us stronger by revealing our weaknesses before it's too late.
Wow, I love that.
Right? So I read that somewhere, I think, or I made it up. I don't know, but it's going in there.
Trademark that.
So I think like don't always, sometimes like lean into the little things because I think that they reveal a lot about us. And I think that sometimes people avoid situations where they might feel slightly uncomfortable, and they do that for so long. And then, that's how you learn about your blind spots. So another way I like to kind of prevent fragility, or at least work on it, is to make sure I get a lot of diverse feedback, because I think it's really easy for people to get stuck in, unknowingly, you get stuck in this bubble, and all of your friends think like you tell them what you want to tell them. Your friends might have the same blind spots, if something happens, like actually maybe it's them, maybe like everyone else would say, hey, you guys are not, you don't have the best attitude or something. So I think diverse feedback is good. And, one of the keys for that is just self-compassion, because it's really hard to hear negative feedback if you have your whole ego attached to it, but if you can just kind of like, they say like accept it as like a part of the learning process, and not say like, this is the end of intelligence, this means I'm not smart. It's like, no, this is the beginning of learning.
Oh, I love that. So good. Yeah, one tool I've heard people use is, instead of, an event happens unexpected, instead of saying like, why is this happening to me? Say, why is this happening for me? Like, what is the learning opportunity?
Yeah, exactly.
Very cool. So you are an expert on luck. Your first book, Can You Learn to Be Lucky? I love the story of how you even got to this topic. What made you start researching luck?
Well, I was where I am right now, actually. I was at my mom's so many years ago. So I spent a few years in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and then I just missed being back in the United States. So I moved back in 2008, 2009, which, as we all know, height of the Great Recession, not the best time to move back. I actually thought that people were just exaggerating how bad things were because all of my friends' Facebook feeds were like them going hiking. And I didn't realize that, oh, it's because like hiking is something you can do for free. And a lot of them had been laid off.
Wow.
I know.
I think we're in that again right now.
Oh, yeah. Right. No one shares their bad news on social media.
Yeah.
So I was just kind of thinking like, okay, so I was having a hard time finding work. And I felt really like socially disconnected because I'd been away for so long. And I just felt like I was in a rough spot. So I thought, okay, what's something I could study that would help me like get over this or like improve my life, right? So what's one thing I can study that would help as many things as possible, like get over this randomness and chaos. So I started studying luck. And then I just started researching and I got really just way too into it. I got started with like math and philosophy and then like complex systems and dynamics and sociology, and it ended up going to like psychology and decision making. So like, what is it that we believe about ourselves? Like, why do we do certain things? And then from the other side, it's like, how do people make decisions about us? So how can we put ourselves in the situation where like we can be chosen as like the default, or we can be given these awesome opportunities?
Yeah, and you didn't just study luck, because I don't have the book here with me because it's at the pregame clubhouse and I'm at home. But the back 20% of the book is just notes. Like you have such a volume of research, like you said, from all different backgrounds on the nature of luck. And spoiler alert, you come to some conclusions about how much luck is a thing or isn't a thing. So tell us.
It is, I mean, it's like so what do you have in mind?
Well, how much control we have over things, are things random or do we create our own luck?
I mean, it's both, right? Because random things do happen. So then ultimately what matters is how we respond to it.
So here's a specific question from somebody on the call with us here. So, a lot of people have had, terrible luck, if you will, with business in all of this. And of course, external circumstances are part of that. But some of us have our businesses up. So this person is a nutritionist. He's seen his business go up in the pandemic, getting a lot of new inquiries. And part of him wants to dismiss it almost as good luck. How can he reframe that so that he sees this as an uptick in business that's going to last? How can he position his business to build on this momentum that's come? Like, is it luck or is it not that his business is up right now?
Right. I mean, I think it depends. I mean, has he asked the new clients at all? Like, why they're reaching out to him? I mean, I think it's one of the things about luck too is like, say you can position yourself in such a way, and then timing, like you can't control for timing. All you can really do is like capitalize on opportunities when they do come up. So sometimes it's like whatever your expertise or whatever your niche is, you've had that for a while, and then like the rest of the universe just kind of like happens to like latch onto that, and it's a good fit. So I mean, I always think like now whenever I hear, is it this or is it this? I'm like, well, it's kind of, a factor of the two, because there are all those external things like that he can't control or she can't control. However, they have a good enough business model or a good enough reputation that people are reaching out, so there are other nutritionists who probably don't have that uptick.
Yeah, I mean, if you hadn't been planting those seeds all along, those external factors that watered and fertilized them couldn't have come along to make them grow.
That is a great metaphor. So, right, it's all about like planting those seeds and like just kind of putting up those like, for hire signs, and like putting up, and like you never buying lottery tickets is another metaphor, right? Just kind of like buying a lot of them, but like being smart about them. So, maybe not quite lottery tickets.
Yeah, we're not necessarily advocating that, but you see the metaphor. So,
Right.
well, then what's the next step in a case like that where, okay, I've seen an uptick in business thanks to all of this, or despite all of this, because of actions I've taken over the past few years, planting seeds. How do I keep that momentum? Like, how do I not just see it as a fluke of the current situation, but keep things driving forward?
I mean, I feel like if whatever that person is doing is working,
Yeah.
you know, so there's something there, like just keep going. But I think, I don't know, I guess I'm like, would that change any strategy at all? Like if they thought it was attributed to luck? Okay, so one thing I will say is that there's one thing I call the luck paradox, which is that luck or external things do happen. However, it is actually in our best interest to like ignore them as much as possible, because whenever we start focusing on external factors that we can't control, we lose our motivation. You start not really looking at your side or what you can do. And so, you know, to a sense, I would almost just say like ignore that you think it's luck at all, you know, just say there's an increase or uptick in clients.
Yeah, I like that because, you know, everything you have been doing is paying off now. It's like overnight success takes 10 years. So
Yes.
those seeds are, you know, and you might have dips in business no matter what happens externally going forward, but, you know, assume the best, but keep going with all of those other tactics you've been using that are paying off now.
Exactly. And then maybe, you know, if you do have a little more, you know, maybe if you want to like try like some other new things, but I like generally, I feel like if you're going in the right direction, like don't stop. And the frustrating thing is sometimes, as you said, like you can plant those seeds for a while and they're good seeds. But you don't necessarily know like when it's going to rain. So you just kind of have to like plant the seeds and then trust that it's going to rain at some point. Sorry about that.
No, I love it. So how do you trust your own abilities in the midst of uncertainty? So maybe you're caught in that loop of doubting yourself. How do you get back that sense of trust in your own abilities or talent or gut?
Well, I think there's one of the things I've been reading about. It's called the hypo egoic mindset. So it's basically just mindfulness, like getting out of your own way and just focusing on your actions. So it is kind of amazing to me, like how much of a layer some people can put on, like kind of overthinking things or like doubting themselves, or it's kind of like when you're choking, you know, in sports. And so the very best thing to do is just have like an external focus and just focus on like the very next action that you can do. And even if it's small, like sometimes you have to break it down, you know, sometimes it's like, okay, I'm just gonna like write a sentence, you know, whatever it is, and then just kind of get the momentum back.
That's exactly what we did before this. Our last session at pregame was, what is the next tiny step you can do in the next week?
Yes.
Yeah, getting that momentum back.
Yeah. And so sometimes it's, it might feel like you're taking a step back because if you have to like kind of downsize your expectations, but you know what, as you said, it's like peaks and valleys. And then sometimes I think that as long as you keep doing other things, right? Like, cause that one thing, it might be only part of the picture, right? So like, what else are you doing? Like, are you taking care of yourself? Maybe there's like some other aspect of your organization or your business you can keep going on. Like I know sometimes when I'm writing, I'm just kind of like, this is kind of boring, but then there's always something I can do. I can always like read something else, like, you know, organize some other aspect of it, just something, you know.
Just keep swimming.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I've been seeing that so much lately. And also it's the whole idea of like zooming out. So it's like, you know, if you're just focused on like this one little thing, like the one little sentence you can write or something, you know, also like zoom out a little bit and like, give yourself a break, you know, because I think it's very easy to ruminate or obsess about something when it's, well, by definition, when you're like paying so much attention to it. So it might not be that big of a deal. So say like Daniel Kahneman, who wrote Thinking Fast and Slow, one of his big things was called the focusing illusion. It's nothing in life matters as much as you think it does while you're thinking about it. So
Oh, that's good. I feel like that's the definition of being a teenager. Like whatever's right in front of you is so huge.
Oh my God, it is everything. Yes.
So you are not just working on one book, you're working on two. Tell us about Making Numbers Count.
Yes. So that I'm super excited about. That I'm working on with Chip Heath, who wrote Made to Stick and Switch. And that is coming out next year at some point. And so originally it was inspired by his framework of Made to Stick. He used to teach a class on that at Stanford. And, you know, one of his principles was don't use numbers because numbers are abstract, no one likes them. And then one year he had a student who said, I'm in finance, I can't avoid numbers, like numbers, that is my world. And so then he just started kind of trying to adapt those principles to numbers. And so that was like where we started. And then since then I've been reading about math and education because you know what? It's part of luck. You just got to lean into the opportunity.
Yeah. So you are tasked with the gargantuan effort of making numbers sexy.
Yes, I know. I have been writing math jokes.
Wow. That is quite a summer.
I've been writing math jokes to make myself, to stay sane in a pandemic. Never thought that my life would be like this, but
the stuff of dreams.
I know.
So give us an example, like, you know, just to put it on the ground, like a case study from the book, or like where are you trying to go with this concept?
Okay, so we have these like principles, sort of like the elements of style by Strunk and White. So you can apply these principles to, you know, kind of transform your number. So one of my favorite examples is I think 97% of Earth's water is salinated, and of that remaining 3%, like 99% is trapped in like underwater or in glaciers. So there's like a very small percentage, like 0.007% of the Earth's water is drinkable. Instead of saying that, you would say, if you took all of the Earth's water and put it into a gallon jug, humans would only be able to drink the last drop.
I love those metaphors. Yeah.
Yes.
So helpful. So
yeah.
I mean, I can immediately see how this would help those of us who are trying to turn numbers into something that matter, that count. So look, what do you think of the applications for what you're going to be trying to teach people?
So definitely I think like, you know, presentations are a big one. I think a lot of time people, they try to like do like a data dump and like, you know, impress you with all these numbers, but I think it's really just about communication. So we're calling it like number translation. So it's really just translating your number from like, you know, numeric, you know, Arabic numerals to English. So it could be anything from like presenting, I think medical, you know, like doctors or like healthcare providers have to like explain something quickly to a patient. It can be law where like, you know, a lawyer has to present something very quickly to a diverse jury. It can be like science communication, science writing, the environment. We're using a lot of examples from the environment. Do a lot of things with like budget, like inequality.
That's huge for public policy, right? Because it's so hard for those of us who are not experts in something to understand what the experts are trying to tell us. I mean, the coronavirus is a perfect example. Like, it's very difficult for people to get their head around the numbers, or, you know, dismiss what's going on, of like, well, the flu kills a bunch of people. Why are we making such a big deal out of this?
It's crazy. So we got our book deal from Simon Schuster a couple months ago, and it was like right before stuff started going down. And I was like, you know, this is amazing. And then it was really kind of funny because right after sold it, we're like, numbers are everywhere. Oh my gosh. It was like the primary coronavirus. And then the economy just started doing crazy things. And we started reading about like trillions of dollars and blah, blah, and right. And then like how this is spreading, exponential growth, all these graphs that started appearing in newspapers, and well, I assume newspapers, I haven't purchased one in ages, but all these graphs that started appearing.
Newspaper apps.
There we go. All these things like exponential growth like started appearing, and like logarithmic versus like linear growth. And so, you know, we're saying like, okay, this is, you know, it's exciting in a way because I think everything that's going on now is like making this need more apparent to like increase general numeracy. And also just from like the public's point of view, I'm excited about this book because I think so many people are like, I can't understand it. I guess it's just because I'm not a numbers person, when really it's just about communication. So I'm really hoping that this book will also like empower people to be able to say like, oh, this is why I don't understand this. It's your responsibility to like communicate it in a way that's, you know, understandable as well. It's not just, you know, my fault for not being able to understand it. Because I think if you had some, you know, researcher go up there and talk about everything in like the most abstract terms, you know, they would understand. It's really just communication. You have to like explain it clearly. So Steven Pinker's book on the style, what is it? Style, you know what it is. He wrote this book on writing that's awesome. He said you just kind of imagine that your audience is very intelligent, just as intelligent as you are, but they happen to be experts in something else.
I love that. Yeah. So that, you know, it's something that's so hard for those of us who are marketing like an innovative product or service, which is a lot of the people who are part of the pregame community. You know, they're growing a business, they've probably innovated in some area, and the job of marketing is difficult because they're trying to explain a new concept to people, so they don't want to dumb it down, you know, and have people think that it's maybe not a quality product or service. But at the same time, we always have to say, like, explain it like I'm 5. Explain it like I'm 5 years old, so that the people who are smart at something else can understand what it is you're trying to do, because also our attention spans are very short right now.
Exactly. So it's another thing too. It's like, I think it's so funny you say like, oh, dumb it down, but it's actually just like clarity, you know, like communication. That doesn't necessarily mean you're dumb. It just means you're reframing your message in a way so that it can reach the broadest audience possible. And like, ultimately, like that should be the goal of whatever it is you're trying to communicate, and not just impress people with your knowledge or confuse them. Because I think if you do that, well, that's another conversation.
We want to be approachable for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it takes a higher level of confidence to make your information simple.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, but the thing is, if it spreads, if it gets people talking, I mean, ultimately, like that's what you want. You know, I feel like so many times people just, they focus on this minutia because they think that it's really important, and they miss the bigger picture.
Mm. You know, I would love to see these numbers concepts applied to money too. You know, it's there's such a lack of personal finance, let alone business finance education in basic school. And then, you know, when I'm coaching people in business or working with people in business, it's very difficult to get people to think about ROI in a way that really drives home the point. Yes. Or even if I'm marketing on behalf of my clients, to help people understand, like, to buy based on value versus price.
Oh, yes. That is a big thing we're looking at too. Finance, and then, right, because I think if you just focus on price, there are actually like a bunch of studies in judgment and decision-making literature, how if you're comparing a few things, and so it might be, you know, a few different apartments, and you're looking at them versus like, so there's price, and then there's location, and then there's maybe, you know, how big it is. If you're kind of stuck, we usually end up defaulting to differentiating based on the one thing that is like very objective, right? So it's like, oh, this one's, you know, $50 cheaper. Like this one's amazing though, you know, the location, but this one's cheaper. And then overall, you know, you're probably going to be like more than $50 less happy.
I like that for sure.
Right. Yeah. So it's hard to quantify things, and it's hard to also understand that, how numbers can fit into the big picture.
So what is one tip for number lovers to communicate more clearly?
Don't use numbers whenever possible.
You got to give one example on that.
Like the gallon jug thing.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, I could confuse you with all these percentages, or I could convert those into actual things that people deal with, or just use an actual example in everyday life, and you get it like that.
I like it. You know, I definitely recommend to everybody to grab your copy of Can You Learn to Be Lucky, Karla's first book. You can get it in all the usual spots. But, you know, and read it all the way to the end, because the last chapter is really where it's at, especially if you're an entrepreneur or small business owner. So can you just sum up, you know, some of that thesis of the last chapter to spoil it for everybody?
Yeah, I mean, so I think in order to truly maximize luck, We really have to accept the fact that everything you think you know might be wrong.
No stress in that.
No stress.
Realization.
But it has really helped, like doing all the research really helped me understand the value of open-mindedness, and also like how our brain, perception, cognition, all that changes when we like assign value to things, or when we automatically kind of evaluate things, right? If you see one thing is good, like one preferred future is good, then like your attention is automatically drawn to things like that, like the things that look like reward. However, if you can kind of make a habit out of assigning value to unknown things, you're just kind of constantly like look around for new opportunities. So I think, from a business standpoint, it's really easy to focus on like, this is my goal, this is my objective, this is, where I'm going. But like, there might be something so amazing that's just kind of like slightly, it's like 2 degrees to the right, but like maybe it's even better. And so understanding like how quickly that can happen, it's been really eye-opening for me. But I'm very grateful that I learned it, because I can honestly say like being comfortable with being wrong, or kind of like letting go of what I think is supposed to happen has just changed my life in so many ways, all for the better.
What a wonderful note to end it on. I love that. But of course, I have to ask, how can people follow you, keep up with the new writing you have coming up? You have a great blog on your website. Tell us how to stay in touch.
Yes, my website is kstarr, kstarr.com. And I have a email newsletter at the bottom of that. Sign up for that. And Twitter, karlastarr.com.
Awesome. Yeah, we cannot wait for the new books. We will get caught up with the first book. And thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for having me.
I spit it cold like lyrically I'm a problem. That's when the show starts. I get it livid. I did it. So who the illest spitter?